welcome to the Newsnet Scotland interview. My guest today is Mr. Phil Attridge, former councillor on the City of Edinburgh Council, and before that the Edinburgh District Council. Phil is a member of the Labour Party.
Aye, right.
Aye, right.
Good leaf expression. Aye, right.
You're a Labour Party member.
Yep.
And how would you like to write an end of year report for your new leader, Mr. Ed Miliband? You know who he is? Or do I need to fill in the details?
Yeah, no.
He's not a high-profile character.
No, but then we've got 4.5 years to the next election, I've no doubt, because they will hang on.
You think the
it's
coalition
a
will
change.
survive?
He doesn't. His hands don't drip with blood, for one thing, because he was lucky enough not to be in when we took all those decisions to go off and do the usual British thing and slaughter hundreds of thousands of civilians across the planet for their own good.
So he's got clean hands.
At the moment, yeah.
But he's providing a limp-wristed opposition to a very right-wing government. I think most of us on the left of Britain, or on the Liberal left, are appalled that there is no opposition.
Yeah, I can quite understand that, but when you have a look at it, it's unravelling from the government's end as well. I mean, if you watch the unravelling now amongst it, not that very long with the NHS down there, they're suddenly realising, all these Europhobes, that if they do what they're doing, it might not be Americans that come in and start running our health service, it'll be these Europeans. Because it comes under the EC rules for tendering and all the rest of it. So things are, yeah, and I can quite understand, but have a look at who else you were offered.
David?
Ed Miliband, I think.
What about the former postman?
Postman Pat, no. Alan Johnson,
Alan
definitely
Johnson.
not. No. And also as well, that's one thing as well with Ed Miliband. That is one thing I thought was a real mistake, was putting Alan Johnson in as a Chancellor. I'm sorry, that was Yvette Cooper's job. She was number one on the list. She's First Secretary of Treasury, competent, and I'm sorry, I just don't really think he's up to the job.
Is there a...
And if you could just picture Yvette Cooper on one side and George Osmond on the other, who's going to get the claps? Who's, on a psychological basis, I thought it would be really good.
Is it possible there is a strategy in the Labour Party at the moment just to keep everybody to keep their heads down and wait for the condemned coalition to make mistakes?
I don't think they've really got much else to do, and I think they'll probably all be getting mistakes. You've seen it with, a bit of arrogance and a bit of, crass stupidity with Vince Cable and the two lovely reporters that came along, and of course he got all full of testosterone and thought, oh, aren't I smart and great, and then, oh dear, caught again. Which is exactly what happened to Jeff Hoon and Byers' mind, I'm just like a taxi. But yeah.
Attractive young female reporters.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. And you get middle-aged menopausal men, and that's it. And they think, oh, I can be young and attractive again.
Well, what about the Labour Party's Scottish leader, Ian Gray?
Oh no, well, if he's going to be First Minister, is he going to? We better watch out we don't go to war with all these small countries that he seems to have this really.
Very good at insulting other countries.
Just grossly insulting other countries. What he's just done to Montenegro,
Iceland,
war criminals,
Norway.
Particularly Ireland. So if he does become First Minister, I should imagine he's going to be treated very well by the First Ministers and etc. of these other countries. You don't think they would take the opportunity to undermine us to any opportunity? I think it's really rather stupid. As he says, he's not very good at facts on the ground when it comes to that. He just tends to open his mouth.
So who do you think is going to be the largest party at the May elections here in Scotland?
The polls would tell you Labour. Polls are wrong, but what gets me is, when you watch First Ministers or you see Smart Alec, you see Alex Salmond, and he doesn't look phased at all. He looks very confident. He's going to hang on, and he doesn't actually look bothered, I think is the real word. Whether he does or he doesn't, But I'm also interested in another individual coming into this, so an effective opposition to everybody, and that's Gorgeous George in Glasgow. That's going to be quite a good one.
George Galloway.
George Galloway, a one-man opposition to everybody.
Yes, he could end up being a Glasgow list.
Well, he needs 15%, no, 5%, something like 15,000 votes will get him into that 5%. Now, I was discussing with other people, and the SNP have been very good in picking up the Asian vote for in Glasgow. But George, with Respect, because it's the Respect Party as well. And there's also that bit, if you remember, we had all those Greens and all those socialists, well, they call them socialists,
there used to be seven.
Those self-annihilating individuals.
Scottish Socialist Party.
Scottish Socialist Party, yeah. Scottish Suicide Party, yeah. So there is that vote out there, and I mean, George might be testing the waters, and you could see Respect coming up here. I mean, Respect, when it was formed, was not going to come into Scotland, but their conference, their executive decided yes to go along with George. And George was a Glasgow councillor, quite popular Glasgow councillor now. So it should be interesting, whoever is First Minister. With the SNP, they might actually be quite happy, because as Swinney was really, they had a go at Swinney. I mean, Mark Chisholm had a go. At a Labour Party meeting when he was going on about this. Yes, just a 1-year budget, and as if this was something horrific.
What's this you're referring to? Oh, this current budget.
Yeah, the current budget's just the 1 year, and I might say, but I said to Malcolm well, he's obviously taking lessons from Alistair Darling then, isn't he? I mean, a 1-year budget. How's it all right for us? It's that double standard, or really not thinking before you speak? Well, having a look around, and nationalist. I mean, I'm not that Scottish nationalist. This flag waving. Well, the accent probably has something to do with it as well. But coming up here, I know a lot of people that come from out with, or particularly come from south of the border. And they can't really get over the insulting of their own country, particularly by certain Labour politicians who.
They're forever putting Scotland down.
They really put it down. I mean, it's what's that word? Is it craven? I mean, is it
craven Scotch?
Oh yes, craven Scotch, or as Alec Newell said to them once. I mean, and he got a real roasting for it quite a few years ago, and he started going on about quislings. That you're undermining your own country because you want another country to run it. And I mean, the Labour Party really needs to get its act together with its image for Scotland. I mean, I know it's in the polls, but it's dropped. The last time they got hammered. And it should be the natural party of Scotland. If we were independent, and I know loads and loads of people that would vote for independence, that would vote Labour in an independent Scotland. I mean, that would be the beauty of it. I mean, if Labour went for independence and got independence, and then they could just thumb it to the SNP, because theoretically they should be in charge. But theories, it's getting interesting. And this
getting interesting. What do you feel about things like? I think the timing. There's been a series. What was it? Sorry, let me just start again. Mr. Cameron, when he became Prime Minister, he said he would show Scotland respect. In fact, he said that during the election campaign last year, did he not? He doesn't seem to be showing much respect by having, for example, a pointless referendum on a pointless change to the voting system that most people couldn't tell you what the difference is, and they don't care. Now they've imposed a referendum, a UK referendum, on the same day as the next Scottish, Welsh, and Northern Irish elections, and we'll have a rerun of the past last year, when the television news will be dominated by the three major London party leaders. We'll hear next to nothing about what's happening in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
Well, I should imagine that's a Tory version of Respect Scotland, isn't it? I mean, mugs for us, or for people for believing it. And this AV system, I believe only about 2, maybe 3 countries in the world.
It makes very little difference to that.
And it makes, it makes very, very little difference. If you're going to have a proportional representation, and I would prefer to go.
STV, it's called.
Yeah, I would prefer to go to what we have in the
Single
Parliament.
vote.
In the Parliament. So that seems to be far better. This just seems to be. Well, I'm always very suspicious because I mean, we know with New Labour as well, when you had that whole bit with that Blairite stranglehold, and all these people that were banned, literally banned. They just never got interviews and they weren't put onto the panel. People like Mark Lazarovich and then you had Susan Deakin weren't allowed to stand for the Scottish Parliament. There was nothing the matter with them, but they weren't obviously Blairite and Crawley enough. So you end up with and it's not just in the Labour Party, it's all part. You find that their executive have a stranglehold, and then that really.
Well, you're saying the parties have.
Yeah, the parties have a stranglehold in their executives, and of course then your regular members that go to branch meetings and constituency meetings, well, they get peeved. They get peeved and they can't be bothered and they don't go. So actually compounding the problem, whereas you end up with a small clique, like the Central Committee.
So what kind of election system are you in favour of?
I would go, but I would like to see a more campaigning on the ground where you're involving people. And to a certain extent, I think if you're going to go to SGB, I would still go for first past the post compared to this AEB. And first past the post, it's a bit more tribal. It's easy, If you win, I mean, you don't go to the bookies. You go, but look, it was right behind you. And I mean, if you win, you win. And have a look at what we've got now. I mean, is this any more democratic? Where we got 30-odd% vote for the Tories, and now they're running because I mean, whatever the Lib Dems say, I mean, they're just sitting there. They're just so besotted with being called deputy leader and minister, and what we've seen it with Vince Cable and strutting about and I can do this and getting into their wagons and having their little red boxes. It's a Conservative government, straight down with 30-odd%. It's a coalition, and you're going to get a lot more of that. Whoever dangles the carrot.
What do you feel about the fact that we're getting we've been offered no referendum on what was the Calman Commission proposal, but which is now, strictly speaking, the Scotland bill that's going through Westminster, which will, just in a simplified form, we're going to change from have powers varied from 3p in the pound in income tax to 10p in the pound in income tax, and have a certain amount of money removed from the Westminster block grant as a result. But at the moment, we're not getting any referendum on this so-called extension of powers to the Scottish government.
Of course not.
But they're having a referendum in Wales in March about extending the powers to Cardiff. There seems to be a double standard going on here.
I suppose it's a double kind of standard with Scotland, because don't forget that Scotland was never conquered or anything else, and I mean, that sort of thing maybe just goes.
So we're not getting. We're getting.
No.
I mean, it's a pig in a poker, a dead parrot, as Stephen Maxwell called it this week. This new Scotland bill. It's a dead parrot because it improves nothing as far as.
It's going to be worse off.
Probably worse off.
Oh, wow,
all the economists are saying that we would be worse off under this new system by at least £500 million a year.
Yeah, at the end of the day, full fiscal autonomy, and the right to use the income from your resources while they're still lasting. I mean, I'm not quite sure when you said earlier on about Ian Gray if he'd actually had a go at Norway. I know it was the other small countries, Iceland and Ireland, or small populations of countries. But I mean, Norway's a roaring success. And it used to be a vassal of Sweden, independent. It's used its oil revenue carefully, it's stashed it, and it's looking after its people. I mean, that is something to have a look at. I mean, we are quite a large landmass for our population in Scotland. Scotland, I mean, if you're looking at electricity, we would eventually, with proper investment, have electricity coming out of barriers.
We've got the resources.
Yeah. We're an inclement climate. I mean, if you have a look at the government down there now, I mean, they're sitting chopping away. There's been rubbish lying in the streets for 5-6 weeks, and I mean, it's a disaster because it's going the American way. If you haven't got the money, go away. That's the way, and that was with New Labour. This whole bit parceling everything out to the private sector. That hasn't been happening so much up here, particularly with this government as well. You know, with looking after the health service, keeping
free
things
prescriptions,
free prescriptions,
maintaining the free personal care, which wasn't an SNP policy, but it was supported.
I mean, it's not mad socialism or anything else. I mean, you can hardly, most sort of Scandinavian countries. I mean, we live in a country and in a climate where we really need to look after each other. You know, whereas other countries where they have that free and unfettered capitalism, they don't care, and they're all actually quite successful capitalist countries because they don't waste money on bad health, and you know they've got good schooling, and so I think we have got a long way to go. And I personally, I don't have any problems with Scottish independence. I know people in the Labour Party and that feel like that as well. But there are this whole idea. It's almost like you're a traitor or this. And I'm sorry, because I'm quite confident in an independent Scotland, we would actually have a Scottish Labour Party rather than an implant called the Labour Party in Scotland.